Welcome to the first session of Dr. Kamini Rao's masterclass. We are on the first session. Our first guest for this session is none other than Dr. Ferzaan Engineer. Dr. Ferzaan Engineer, a pharmacy graduate and master's by profession, but has multiple roles ranging from care of the elderly, research organizations, setting up CROs, cancer hospitals and whatnot. He's got a finger in every pie. And that is what makes him not the ordinary, but that extra, and that's extraordinary for us. So that catchline, why be ordinary when you can be extraordinary? We also know from Dr. Ferzaan Engineer that he has been all the time thinking, what is next? How can I be different? And the day he gets up, he thinks of something new. There are hundreds of ideas in his head that he wants to put across. There are meetings and meetings that take place in all the different institutions that he heads. And believe me, there is lots of people that he has trained. What is more important is this person, the extraordinary person that he is humble and is still patient to listen to each and every person and sees the best in everybody. More for you of Dr. Ferzaan Engineer during my conversation with him. Welcome, Dr. Ferzaan Engineer.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on the show.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ferzaan Engineer. We have known each other for so many years.
That's right.
And we've also worked together in your Cytecare hospital. But believe me, the ever smiling face and the always ever patient to listen at any small idea that comes across, and that notebook of yours and putting down those points there and making sure that you follow it up really amazed me. Now, when you were young, and I'm sure you're young today as well, but which college did you go to and what was your influence during your school days, and was there anything that really made you think that you would get into any of these kind of profession as a schoolboy, for example?
I grew up in Ahmedabad. I went to St. Xavier's Loyola School there, and it was a great experience, a very diverse school. I had classmates and teachers from different parts of the country, from very different backgrounds, professional backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds. So it was great. It was a great time. I grew up there. As the only child of my parents, and then went to pharmacy school. Our pharmacy school in Ahmedabad is, I think, the oldest institution in the country from which pharmacy education started. And I got interested in research, and I finished my baccalaureate degree, my B.Pharm in pharmacy, and then went to the US for my PhD.
But being the only child, did you feel lonely? Did you ever feel that you missed the siblings? Or did you say that, okay, fine, being alone is okay?
I didn't know any different, but now I have two children. I have a 25-year-old son, Varun, and a 19-year-old daughter called Anaya. And when I see them together, I realize that I miss something. It would have been nice to have a sibling.
What made you take up pharmacy? But that's not one that people would take as mainstream, because I think during your time people would be looking at either engineering or medicine or something like that. Pharmacy would be a little bit off track.
I was always interested in medicinal research, and I thought pharmacy would be a good sort of basic qualification. And I think that's the path I took, and it interested me a lot, and it still does actually.
How do you find the education that you had in the West to what you had in India? How do you find the difference?
I think I'm grateful for both types of education. I think both had value and both are very different. What I particularly liked about the US education was its flexibility. You could become a student at any age. In fact, later on I became an assistant professor, and some of my students were in their 40s and 50s. So it was a very flexible system. It has a certain flexibility which is not easily found in other systems. So I think a good grounding in India, in the basics, followed by the US system is probably not a bad prescription.
Because Ferzaan, when I went to the UK for my education, and I had my education in India, you see, the medical education in India is more oriented towards practice, whereas in the UK it is more oriented to SOPs and what you should not do, what you should do, evidence-based medicine. But if you have to see something like about 150 patients in a day,
Sure.
I don't think you have time for all that. When I went from India, being in a government hospital, and then going across to the UK, and then having to see, say, 5 patients or 6 patients.
You had a more structured environment.
And we had a very structured environment. I was feeling bored because I was more interested in cutting, and I was more interested. And it took me quite some time. It was almost like a culture shock, to try and get. And after I finished and came back, again it was again revisiting the culture shock, getting back and saying, how can I operate in this system? Or how can I work in this kind of an operating theatre? So it's basically 2 different worlds altogether. And I would say that you must visit both the worlds, because on one side you will get the best of both, and that's why I would say a bit of Western education certainly will benefit us to mold us 360 degrees, when you get back. So from that research, anything came out like patents or publications or something like that?
Publications came out, Dr. Rao. I didn't know later on in life I would do a cancer hospital, but coincidentally my research was in cancer. I worked on various anthracyclines, I worked on their pharmacokinetics, I worked on their cardiotoxicity. Not on the clinical side, but on the laboratory side.
Did your father do, and father and mother?
My mother was a teacher. She recently passed away at 90, and my father was a businessman. We initially ran a factory making aerated waters, all the sodas and things that you drink.
Okay.
And then later on, he had a trading business. So he came from a mercantile background.
So what made you come back to India? The sudden death of your father?
I think that precipitated it, but I always thought I would come back.
And after coming to India, did you have any kind of preconceived ideas as to what you're going to do when you come back, or you just said, let me come back and then think about it? And
I just came back. You could say I took a risk, but I didn't see it that way. And it worked out very well. I had many opportunities when I came back to work for multinational companies, Indian companies, and so forth. And I actually picked an opportunity which I'm still very grateful for, which was to set up something completely new. And there was this big IV fluid company, and they wanted to make a significant investment and set up a world-class research center. And they said, can you do it? Now, I'd never set up a research center before, but I said, sure, I'll do it, and then figure it out as we go along. So I had an opportunity to do something completely new. From scratch, there was no building, no team, no people, nothing. We started from zero, and it was a great learning experience. Obviously, you make a lot of mistakes as well, unfortunately, but you try and make as few as you can and then try and learn from them.
don't make the same mistakes again.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, but I think, being able to take up such a challenge and to say that, yes, I will do it, that itself, takes a lot of guts.
I find that motivating. I find it very exciting. Yeah.
Good. And you never felt that fear of failure or anything? Or what is it that just told you that I'm going to go for it?
No, I didn't feel fear of failure. I thought I would try, and if I made a mistake, I would try and overcome it. But I never experienced any fear.
So your bosses believed in you?
I was fortunate in that regard, and I was always transparent with them and had a very good relationship. In fact, even now I have a good relationship with people I work for.
But when you started doing this with parenteral fluids, what were you thinking of at that point of time when there was nothing there, so there was no road to follow. You had to create that road, and then you had to sort of walk on it. See, people say, why don't you sort of seize these opportunities? But then if there's no opportunity, you have to create the opportunity and seize it. That's something different, and that makes you different.
See, there was a huge change going on at that time, where modern technology was coming in, and you could make parental products at very large volumes. What this company didn't have were specialized products, but they had the vision to figure out that that was needed. It would become even more important in the future because they had the ambition, which ultimately fructified as well, to become a global company. And to become a global company, they needed research, they needed innovation, they needed more high value added products, hence the investment in R&D. So you have a big successful business which is keeping your stock price high or whatever, but you also know that unless you invest in research, that is not sustainable. So I had the opportunity to develop all kinds of new products, total parental nutrition, various blood substitutes. We developed a lot of these things ourselves in our laboratory. We formed partnerships. A lot of the amino acids that go into TPN come from Japan, actually. And a lot of technology that goes into not only the engineering that's involved in IV fluids, but also in emulsification for fat emulsions and so on, actually come from Germany. So I had the opportunity to collaborate with various labs around the world and do this with my team. So it's very interesting stuff.
So it means TPN, for my viewers, is total parenteral nutrition.
That's correct.
Yeah, and so that means that people who are not able to take anything by mouth, or they have some bowel problems, need to be fed with all the necessary ingredients to keep them well hydrated and with nutrition.
And it's very interesting, the original formulas actually come from the egg.
Yeah.
So they actually map the egg, the nutrients, and then try to do this.
Which is good, but what do you think was the turnaround time from the time you got that piece of land? I think you were just talking to me and saying that 7 acres of land is what you purchased, and then you started putting up all these things. So what was the turnaround time, and what was the feeling during that time when, you must have had times, where things didn't go right for you, and there are times that really, your heart missed a beat, saying, I didn't do something right. How did you face those kind of moments?
It's important to have a strong team and to put together a team with different strengths. And I think that helped me carry things through. We were very successful with some of the things we are talking about. We also wanted to set up a big center for basic research, which eventually I couldn't do. And then I went on to form a joint venture and start a new industry in India, which is called the CRO industry, which is the contract research industry. And me and my colleagues and my team, we had an opportunity to start international clinical research in India with a partner called Quintiles Transnational, which was then the leading CRO in the world, and still under a different name is the leading CRO in the world.
Yes. In fact, you're known for getting people together, and you're known for putting, a lot of productivity from different, and also, people who have different strengths, and get them together and, multiply that and get products which are much above what you would have expected as a single person. For example, before Quintiles came in, you did get 4 or 5 big companies coming in. Which were these companies that you were thinking of talking to?
They were the big CROs at the time. This was in the late 90s, and most of the CROs were headquartered in the United States. And I had the possibility to talk to most of the big ones, and many of them agreed to start a venture in India. But Quintiles and its founder, Dr. Dennis Gillings, were the most global in their outlook. They saw huge potential in India, and to me that was very important. And ultimately India did become, and still is, a very important center for everything that Quintiles does. On the clinical side, on the data side, on the biostatistics side, on the drug safety side. So I think India found its rightful place over, I would say, about a 20-year period.
So Dennis Gillings, you've got a good, nice story about him and how you got to know him, and he's still a very good friend of yours. Now, how did you get to know him?
Oh, I cold called on the major CROs and had the possibility to meet him and bring Quintiles here. And his own story is also very motivating because he started as an academic, as a professor of biostatistics, and ended up creating the biggest CRO in the world. So it's a very motivating story. And I think these things do motivate you.
Absolutely. And he also tried to take this out of US to Japan and to other countries.
To Japan,
Singapore,
Australia,
China,
Africa,
yes.
everywhere.
So that is, and he was one of the first to do that. Yes.
Quintiles was the most global of the global CROs.
Absolutely. And how did Quintiles start? Because we hear Quintiles is the largest. So
Quintiles started with very modest beginnings. It actually started in a trailer in the university campus where Dr. Gillings used to teach in Chapel Hill. And practice as a biostatistician grew and really did very well. And he was able to grow very quickly. He was able to start many different things beyond biostatistics and become a full service global CRO.
this is what.
So it's a great story, I think.
Yes, it's. I mean, starting as in just in a trailer, that a company like Quintiles is now worth billions of dollars.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and this is what my viewers should know, that you have to think big and you have to dream big and you can achieve it, and that is very important. So given that that is the situation here, and in Quintiles, you started the Quintiles in India, is that, and you headed Quintiles in India?
I started Quintiles with my colleagues. It's really a team effort, and we had and still have a fantastic team. We started in 1997, and I ran the company in India and multiple other countries, Southeast Asia, China, Australia, Sri Lanka. And I did that for about 12, 13 years. It was a wonderful experience. Not only did we run Quintiles operations in different countries, but we also had the possibility to start global businesses which were run out of India. So the original definition of a BPO was that you just did back office work in India, but we also had the freedom, the opportunity and the possibility to start global businesses and run them all over the world out of India.
So it's like a KPO.
It became a KPO. Not so unusual today, but at that time it was relatively new, and it was a fantastic experience, I think.
That's great, because it's always that India always takes the work, outsourced work, and then they do it. And this is the first time that they were actually giving work to others, and decision making was in India. Is that right?
A lot of decision making was in India. A very large global data management vertical was run out of India. A big cardiac safety business which employed maybe 300, 350 cardiologists in India was run out of India. And we had offices in other countries. We also had a joint venture with Thermo Fisher Corporation called Senduit, which was run out of India but was present in Europe and the US. So in many ways it was coming of age for the drug development industry in India. And obviously many other things were happening in parallel. and this was only on the clinical side, but you saw that evolution in so many things, right? I mean, you yourself built a very large enterprise, and you see it with the big IT companies also, how they became world leaders. So it's interesting times, and I think it still continues.
Just like to know that we've talked a lot about the past, but now currently you have a finger in so many pies, and I must sort of acknowledge that you're doing so well in all of them. What about Cytespace, Cytecare, and of course the Medwell? I'd like to talk on Cytecare to start with, because that is your pet project. Can you give me some background? Why did you want to get into the healthcare space and particularly into cancer? Any particular story behind it?
So we are a team of co-founders, as you know, and we were discussing which projects we should do. And we looked for opportunities where there was a gap, where we could do something in India which would set a new paradigm and which would fulfill a societal need, have high impact, and would have a high scientific content. And we felt that cancer care and cancer research in India needed a lot more than what is currently the case. So we spent quite a lot of time visiting some of the top institutions in our country, Tata Memorial, for example, and various institutions in the United States. And we first tried to model what a top cancer treatment center would look like, not only from the clinical side, but in every possible way, because cancer requires a lot of care even at the psychological level in addition to the clinical level. And we realized that we needed to set up a super specialist center, an organ-based hospital where there is a dedicated team of surgeons for every different type of cancers, or for most different types of cancers. It's cancer care is collaborative, so we have a tumor board which is run to a very high standard, where different disciplines, whether it's radiology or radiation or chemotherapy, surgery, psychological well-being of the patient, the social workers who work with us, everyone collaborates, the pathologist, the laboratory, everything, and comes up with exactly the right protocol for that patient. And then one has the challenge of delivering it expertly, safely, in an affordable way, and with a lot of love and affection for the patient. So it has been quite a challenging project. It's been about 4 years now, and I think the hospital has come out very well. We have touched more than 10,000 patients from about 20 different countries, and we are very proud of what has been achieved. I think it has made a significant difference to cancer care in our country. And now that we have this model working, we are trying to see how we can replicate it in other cities. So it's been a very interesting journey. It has various personal motivations also for me and my team members. Obviously, cancer is a disease that touches many families. I have been personally touched by it in my family. So there are certainly personal motivations for doing what we do. And also, from a scientific point of view, it's very interesting because maybe about 40% of all research that happens in oncology. So it's a very dynamic field in terms of various types of research that goes on worldwide, and we do participate in very high quality clinical research in addition to running the regular hospital.
Yes, Ferzaan, I had an opportunity to visit the hospital, and what struck me in that hospital was that you've got consultants who are par excellent. They are people who have come from the premier institutions in the country and who've done loads of surgery in that particular specialty, and they've come here and they've set themselves up. So rather than having patients only from the city, you're getting patients from all over coming to see them here, which in itself is sort of a flag off as far as this center is concerned. And also I have found that the caregivers there, the support caregivers there also are really trained well, because when you go across and see, and the hospital is spick and span, you don't get that hospital kind of atmosphere there, and it's very, very friendly. Have a cafeteria there, and people who can just go and pick up say a juice or a sandwich or something while waiting there, and there's always a smiling face at the reception. And these are some of the welcome things that you don't really see in a cancer kind of hospital, because you always say cancer, oh my god, I don't want to be there. But this is almost like a welcome sign, saying that look, you're not alone in cancer, we are there to help you. I think this is something that you people have made a difference to cancer care, and I've seen that if these kind of hospitals come across in every city, I think that would be a human service to India.
We want to destigmatize cancer, and for the hospital to be a very happy place. Yes. You might have seen we have various musical instruments, we have art therapy, so it's a happy place, it's a vibrant place. We celebrate birthdays, we celebrate every single festival, and I think that's part of the healing process. And we've been very fortunate. Some of the finest clinicians in the country have joined Cytecare, and we're also trying to create a hospital which is patient-centric. So the patient comes first, and the whole edifice is then built around the patient. So after the patient, obviously the most important component are the best doctors in the country, and we've been very fortunate that they're with Cytecare. And then, like you said, that itself alone, in and of itself, is not enough. You need the right ambience, you need the right services. We have nutritionists, we have psychologists to help our patients, etc. And it's really a team effort. There's a fantastic team of people who are running the hospital, each specialized in their own way. And only when the team comes together you can do this. It's probably true in any business, but I think particularly for a cancer hospital, a team really has to come together, otherwise it doesn't work.
Yeah, I can see the gleam in your eyes when you talk about Cytecare, because I know the number of hours you've spent, on the drawing board, working out every detail about where everything should be, including the pieces of art that is hanging on the walls there. It's really nice to see you as you go along. At least if you're going there for the first time, it occupies your attention. Every time you go here, you don't really feel like you're in a hospital. It could be perhaps like an art museum or something like that. And I have not seen this in any other hospital.
And in today's time, it's especially helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because after the pandemic, there is a certain hesitancy to go to a hospital, and our patients don't experience that.
So are you an art lover?
I'm personally an art lover, yes. And
that shows.
Now I have a daughter going to art school, so we are interested in art as a family.
Yes. And that's where precision comes in, discipline comes in. So I think these are some of the things that certainly goes a long way in molding your thought processes in your profession as well, because when you have art into this in this profession, art gives you a kind of a soothing effect. When you're really working hard, this is how I actually approach it, because when I came into Cytecare to visit somebody, and I thought I was in a totally different place. I mean, that was an experience just totally different, and I even wrote there that this is fantastic. So that's one of your ventures which I would highly recommend. If anyone has cancer, they should be going there. But why Medwell? I mean, now that is also for caring, home care services and all that. How did you get into that?
So as a team, we decided to do three different things, the cancer hospital being one.
Yeah.
The other field, which I think is still evolving and it still has a long way to go and huge potential, is home health care, and particularly home health care focused on the elderly. Social changes taking place in our country, joint families becoming more nuclear, children working in different parts of the country or different parts of the world. Elder care, and also for home health care. So rather than a person going to a hospital, the hospital coming home. And what I would call out of hospital care. So of course there are many things where you must go to a hospital, but there are many other things where if you try to map different processes and say which processes require you to go to a hospital and which can be done outside a hospital, then I think more than 50% of processes in certain things, thanks to miniaturization, thanks to technology, thanks to the internet, you can actually do at home. And in India, obviously it's a populous country, and there is a significant logistical challenge in terms of last mile delivery. But if you are able to bring all this together, the logistics, the technology, the doctors, the nurses, etc., there's a lot of work we can do at home. So we set up a company called Nightingales. We are about 700 people in 4 Indian cities, and we do medical interventions, we do nursing, we do bedside care, we do physiotherapy and rehab. And I think it's an evolving field, which is the need of the hour right now in India. And interestingly, some of our team members who are in other countries are also entrepreneurial. So they ended up building the biggest home healthcare company in South Africa called Medwell SA. So Medwell actually has a South African component, which is the largest home health business in that country, as well as being one of 2 or 3 large home health companies in India. So it's a very exciting field. A lot more logistics than running a hospital, and also very exciting from in terms of deploying technologies.
Ferzaan, it's not only about technology, but how do you manage the human resources? Because particularly when you have these home help services, particularly nurses and physiotherapists and a whole lot of the sudden absenteeism, and when they don't do the services properly, patients sometimes complain, and these kind of things is very difficult to manage. So how do you get them trained? And this in itself could be a huge challenge.
I agree.
Isn't it?
And as you know, Dr. Rao, I mean, in pretty much every area of medicine, we have a human resource challenge.
Absolutely.
In terms of number of doctors per population, number of nurses, whatever. I think we need to do a lot more in terms of increasing these numbers, in terms of training, in terms of continuing education. And I know you're doing a lot yourself with all your continuing education programs. And we do face these challenges. We do a lot of things to address them. First of all, we employ people in the right way. We provide training, pension. We are a good employer. A lot of focus on training. And you're right, attrition rates are high in our country. So you need a very strong staffing function. You need training. You need various ways to retain talent. And these are some of the challenges the whole industry faces.
What about Cytespace? That's a research organization, isn't it? How much of time do you spend in that place?
Cytespace, we actually founded first, and then 1 or 2 years later, the other 2. Cytespace is also interesting. You see, there is a common thread across these 3 projects, and the common thread is we look for a gap, we look for a need in an industry or in the society. And then you try and do something which raises the bar, which sets a new benchmark. So in site space, if you look at clinical research, a lot of errors get made at clinical research sites. And then you do a lot of monitoring, and you would be used to this being a opinion leader yourself. A lot of monitoring happens where data gets checked. And as you said at the beginning of this talk, the Indian environment can be chaotic, and you're seeing a very large number of patients in a very short time. So in that situation, a doctor doesn't have the time to document correctly or to document enough. And obviously that is as important in clinical research as the clinical intervention itself. It's not just about intervening clinically, but also about documenting everything. And if it didn't get documented, it didn't happen. So there's a huge component of documentation, which we thought we would bring as our value add at different sites. So we are present in about 65 different hospital sites in India. We developed software and technology to help us. And we basically do the non-clinical stuff at the hospital site so that the data is right in the first place. And that can have a big impact in terms of making clinical trials more efficient. So we're doing something very different, and I think it has been quite successful. We also do data management and biostatistics for customers all over the world.
That's excellent, because when you really get to the point and you really put your finger on the unmet need in the population, you're able to fulfill that unmet need. I think that's...
So that has been a common thread for us, yeah.
So I think that's
across different projects.
Going across, in fact, when I did visit your home, I saw a lot of cameras there. Now, you're a collector of cameras now. What is that about?
Some sort of eccentricity, but I'm interested in design. I'm interested in beautiful objects. And these cameras, they're made by a company called Leica. And Leica invented 35mm photography in the mid-20s, actually. So they're beautiful objects. I think they're an example of Art Deco, and mechanically beautiful. I guess a bit like classic cars in a way. So it's a very interesting hobby, and it has a lot of history to it, because these cameras were part of the Second World War.
But how do you get those films and all that? I mean, Kodak films and things like that.
I don't use them so much. I have kept them more as my way of preserving history, because because many of them are, although some of them are, I don't know, maybe 90 years old, they're still in perfect condition. So it's more like a museum than something you use. But if you do choose to use them, they will work perfectly, and you can still buy film today. You can also use the same lenses on digital cameras.
Okay.
And the Leica lenses are among the finest in the world. You'll also see them in microscopes
yes,
and various scientific applications, in surgeries and theaters.
I was just wondering, and you have these mechanical cameras where you have to keep turning that, reel, and then you then click, and then again turn, and we had to wait sending it across to the Photoshop and getting it developed. Is that the same thing that those sort of cameras are you talking about? So you have a dark room and you develop those things?
No, I used to when I was younger, not anymore. Yeah.
Okay. Because I used to wonder, and today hardly have you just clicked and then you get the photograph. So that is technology here. But interesting. So how many cameras do you have?
Oh, I don't know, maybe 40, 50, something like that.
To the present day, all the SLRs and all that.
No, I stop in the mechanical age.
Only the mechanical.
So these are from the 20s, 30s, 40s and 50s. And that's all. Then I stop collecting because you have to set some boundary.
Okay.
And this is what I've chosen to do.
And
these are cameras before electronics came into cameras.
what about other hobbies? Art, for example. So what kind of art? Are you an art collector?
I love art and I have a small collection. I like modern Indian art, so basically masters from the 50s and the 60s. I like artists from that era,
Okay.
whether it's a Gaitonde or a Hussain or a Raza or a Kishan Khanna.
Okay.
I like artists from that period. I enjoy other types of art as well, but whatever little I have comes from that period.
Okay. What about your daughter's taken after art because of that, or is it?
Not sure. But she suddenly discovered it as a passion.
Okay.
And I think it's interesting, once you find your passion, you get energized by it, and she spends days and nights doing it, and you don't really have to tell her to study because...
So, but how much of an influence are you on her for this art that she's interested in?
I think she's also an influence on me, actually. I learn,
The other way.
I learn, yeah, it's probably more the other way, but I am an influence in the sense that I encourage her.
So there's no restrictions as such?
No.
Nothing. And what about her studies? Does she pay equal attention to studies and to her hobby?
She did well in her studies, but now the hobby has become the study.
Okay.
Because she is enrolled in the Art Institute of Chicago for her baccalaureate
Okay.
degree. So the hobby and the study has become the same thing,
Which is good. because
which is great, because then, you know,
Then
Yeah.
she would just be fantastic in it.
yeah.
Yeah.
So if it works out, I think she'll be very fortunate, because the two things are not different anymore.
I think that should be a lesson to so many parents,
I think so.
that you should not box your child into some kind of
I think
size which doesn't fit.
Yes.
And you should allow the child to grow and allow the child to think what they want to do.
I completely agree with you. This would be transformational if it were to happen, because very often we want them to do the same thing we did, for example, or have some preconceived image
Yes.
that someone should just become a doctor or an engineer or,
Yes.
or an IT person or whatever it might be. But now if you see young people, there are so many professions. People become artists, they become chefs, they become musicians, in addition to all the other things. I don't think it matters. What matters is you find your passion, and then as a parent you do whatever you can to help them and nurture that. Yeah.
So what is your message to the viewers, Ferzaan? Because there is a lot of viewers across who want to know, why be ordinary when you can be extraordinary? And you're that extraordinary person. And what could be your message to them? You've achieved so much in so many diverse careers of yours. So how would you advise them?
My message really would be that each person needs to find his or her own definition of success. I don't think there is a fixed definition of what is success, what is happiness. You have to find it for yourself. I think it's a very individual investigation, a very individual journey. And then obviously you have to work hard. There are also practical realities. You have to time things well, you have to be in the right place at the right time. There are many practical things, but I think the practical things follow or should follow the basic thing, which is to find out what is my vocation, what's my passion, what is it that energizes me. I think if you get that right, the rest kind of follows. You have a tailwind to success. So I guess that would be my message. Thank you very much.
Dear viewers, Ferzaan has given his thoughts to you, and I would like to tell you, it's never too late to change, and change is the only thing constant in life. And if you feel that your passion has not been achieved, it's only because you have not tried enough. And The mantra here is don't fear of failure. Failure gives you rich experience, so does success. So do go ahead, do try, and I'm sure you will never know how close you are to success when you give up. So never give up, just go out there and do it. That's Dr. Kamini Rao's masterclass for you. Thank you, Dr. Ferzaan, for this particular program. You have been just wonderful.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
In fact, human potential always mesmerizes me. We brand people as belonging to a certain category. Oh, he's a great engineer, he's a great scientist and all that. Similarly, I had a perception about Dr. Kamini Rao. She is a specialist, she's a gynecologist, she's an infertility expert. All that I knew. But when you find the other side of a human being, it really surprises you. Dr. Kamini Rao is a person who can discover what is good in other people. She started this masterclass program, to which I became a party to it. Amazing. She asks questions so pointedly and beautifully, it discovers yourself for you. And this is called as a masterclass truly because it is truly a masterclass. Masterclass in two ways. One is introducing a guest to you, and secondly, discovering a guest for yourself and allowing you, most important, to discover yourself through the program. I'm sure when you watch this program, Masterclass by Dr. Kamini Rao, you're not only watching a program, but you're trying to discover yourself. It is a journey of self-discovery. Go ahead, enjoy the discovery yourself.